It's a challenging time for young people. They're struggling, honestly, and I really want to be a voice of guidance or motivation or help or just someone that they can talk to, because I think that this world is a very challenging time and there are so many people who are just disregarding young people and not paying attention, and they're just getting lost in the shuffle. Though that's not to say there are incredible young people who are just like pushing forward, but like it's just a difficult time.
Welcome to another episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dusick. I was the founding drummer of Maroon 5, but I'm now a licensed therapist, author, and mental health advocate. On today's show, she helps young people navigate entering adulthood in this crazy world we're living in now. Returning to the show, pathfinding coach Hillary Spiritos. But with me, as always, is my co-host, Duck Maylard. How you doing, Duck?
I'm a little under the weather, but I'm a professional broadcaster, so I'm here. I'm gutting it out. How you doing?
You actually sound worse than I do, and I'm under the weather too.
Well, I think I'm a few days behind you, because you wrote me the other day, you're like, I'm sick. I'm like, oh, poor baby. And then I woke up, I'm like, no, I'm sick. So I'll sound like you in 2 days.
Well, I think I know exactly where I got sick. Do you know where you got sick?
Well, we were making out.
That's probably what it was.
I think that's probably where I got it.
That's where the herpes came from.
Right. I don't know. I've been at an event every night for the past 3 weekends with my son, whether it's, a school dance type activity or a baseball we've been out nonstop. So it was only a matter of time for me. How about you? Where'd you get your bug?
Well, I spoke at an event last week. I was at a conference down in Costa Mesa, beautiful Costa Mesa, California. And yeah, it was the first keynote speech I've done in a while, which was wonderful, went really well. And I just didn't want to leave. I was hanging out, shaking hands and taking photos and signing books and doing all the
shaking
good
hands
stuff.
part. That's what's going to get you.
Yeah, I think
Didn't
that's
we learn
probably where it
anything
happened.
from COVID?
Well, I have this feeling, I don't know, because I never used to get sick. I still don't that often, but I have more in the last 5 years, I feel like. And I don't know what it is, because I've only tested positive for COVID once, but I've had a cold or flu a few times, which isn't like me. And I feel like since COVID, for some reason, anytime I go to place where people congregate, it's like we're all just super spreaders now for some reason.
Or who knows if there's weakened immune systems or more susceptible to little colds, if COVID is the sort of the king of colds. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we're the scientists to figure this out. So
it's absolutely. That's what this episode's going to be about today. Debunking those darn COVID myths.
Yeah. Well, anyway, are you doing all right?
It's my wife had it much worse. My wife she has asthma, and so anytime she gets a cough, the cough exacerbates the asthma, and the asthma exacerbates the cough, and she just ends up hacking sounds like a 3-pack a day smoker, and it's terrible. I feel really bad for her. So I've got it easy compared to her, but she's on the upswing as well. She got it before me, so it's going around the house. It gives me this great radio voice, which it only improves things for our listeners. I hope.
Well, it adds sex appeal. That's the thing.
Right. Which if I didn't know how it was possible to add more, and yet here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are.
So Hillary returned to the show. Hillary Spiritos,
our first return guest.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not that Hillary wasn't a wonderful guest. It's just, if you think of some of our conversations, we've sort of ended for time and been like, we got to have you back. But Hillary was like the first person who was like, I'd love to come back and talk more about this stuff. So we jumped at it. We love an opportunity to follow up with somebody.
Yeah. I mean, I've always liked the idea of, you can't tackle and finish a topic in an hour. Like some of the things we talk about are such big, enormous, broad topics and issues that continue to stump us in terms of how we deal with them as human beings and as a society. In particular, when you're talking about navigating the world, basically.
just that little question.
Yeah, I always like the idea of having people on, like if we have a particularly either interesting conversation or a topic that does, necessitate further exploration or further debate, having somebody back a second time or a third time and continuing that conversation. But this is the first time that somebody just came to us, and I'm impressed by that. I think that I would never think to do that when I was on somebody else's show, to be like, you know what, I want to come back soon and continue this conversation or talk about more stuff. So that's like, to me, I don't know. I kind of want to ask her. That's one of the first things I want to ask her is like, well, what was the impetus for that? Because it impresses me.
Yeah, I'm constantly reminded of our conversation with David Robson. If you remember, we talked about the expectation effect and things. And every time we have a guest or we have a something where we have an expectation about, well, if I was on a show and I asked to come back, I would think that would be forward or that would be rude. But on the contrary, like Hillary did that, and you say yourself, you're impressed. Like how
Right.
awesome that she would take that and say, I had such a great time. I want to continue this conversation. And I think we have to learn from that like putting yourself out there and not even taking a risk, but just being bold and going after what you want is admired by people, not looked upon with like, oh, how dare they? We don't clutch pearls anymore. You know what I mean? So we got to learn from that. Learn from Hillary.
I think I've talked about this before on the show, but just putting myself out there, self-promotion, that type of thing is always, as the young people say, cringe to me.
We've had a whole conversation about that.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about that, to go on a total tangent for a moment. Since you brought that up in one of our intros, maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was like a whole thing that the young people, that's the whole phenomenon of youth culture.
Yeah.
I thought you were speaking about it in a broader sense of just, people being cringy or old people not getting
right.
that young people think they're cringy. But you have a kid right in that age range. Like you are so privy to exactly. Is he doing 6'7"? Is that where he's at?
Well, no. See, that's the thing. 6'7" is already cringy. Like,
okay.
That's how quickly it moves. Like you remember the skibbity toilet stuff from 3 months ago?
I
like,
mean, I heard that word. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It goes so quickly. But like I said that, to my son and his friend the other day, I was like, is that totally skibbity toilet? And he just like withering the look of like, Dad, nobody says that. And some kids still do the 6'7" stuff, but he's already beyond it. He's like, oh my God, it's so tired. And yeah, his whole life is just kind of balancing what was cool and now what is not, and conveying that information with the utmost prejudice to me to teach me lessons. But yeah, it's wild to see him kind of navigate that in real time and see. I don't know what the criteria is for when something is no longer cool or if it never was, but he's got it figured out somehow. He's 12 and right in the middle of it.
Well, certainly I would think that if you're seeing it on late night shows and showing up on the nightly news and people joking about 6'7", it's probably not cool to the kids anymore.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing to observe. Of course, when we were that age, we were in on what was the cool thing to a certain extent. Even if you're not cool, what the cool thing is. You're trying to keep up with the trends, and you think old people are just so lame and just not with the times. And then you get to be the age that we are now, and you see it from a different perspective. And of course, we feel old and uncool when we see trends pass us by and we can't keep up. But at the same time, you watch the phenomenon, for instance, of everyone doing something that has no meaning whatsoever, but they're all doing it. Like 6'7", right? Has no meaning, but they're all doing it. And it just shows you like how badly we want to fit in, how badly we will do
I don't know what this is, but I'm going to do it because everyone else is doing it. Yay!
Yeah. And I mean, I guess there's some rebellion to it because the adults don't yet understand what it is. It doesn't matter that it means nothing. It's just like, it's our thing,
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think 99% of the people, the young people, are just trying to do what they feel is cool to do in the moment.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it before, how like, I still want to believe that. I'm like, yeah, but those are the other dads. Like, I played in a rock band. I'm an actor. I'm cool. It really doesn't matter. Like, I used to pick up my son from school on Tuesdays with his friend, and every day is just in the back seat. And for the first, couple of months, I'd be like, so how was school? What'd you guys do today? I just learned quickly, just shut up and drive. They do not want to hear my input. And anytime I do, I get the same, like, in the rear view that like, oh, Dad, and I don't take it personally because I know it's a required part of development of like pulling away from your parents. And I hope we get to the point soon where, I mean, I had jokes like that with my friends in high school and college that my mom was like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're making fun of me. And we would just laugh and it was good natured. So I hope we get to the good natured part soon where my son can be like, oh, Dad, you old dinosaur, as opposed to like the disdainful eye rolls that I get now. But we'll see.
Well, I know you're a really sensitive guy, and you obviously you take your relationship with your son very serious. It's a big part of your identity. And so how do you maintain a positive outlook of like how this is going in the midst of a very age appropriate splintering that happens when everything you do is lame? How do you
what I do is Yeah, what I do is I look at it as two separate things. When he's with his friends or when he's, online and talking to people and it's like, "Yes, Dad, I'm coming. Hang on, hang on. Yeah, I'm coming." Like I understand that's embarrassing. But when it's just the three of us, my wife, my son and I, he's different. And as long as that stays the pure sweet kid where he's, "I'll explain it to you, Dad. 6'7" doesn't mean, then we're good. If he starts doing that to us when it's just the three of us, then we're in trouble. But and it still he's in the alone in his room time now. Like the door closes and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And like I'll open the door and he's just like lying on his bed, hitting a balloon up to the sky. I'm like, "What do you like? Come out and hang out with us." He's like, "No,
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good with this balloon." you know. So I like you say, it's a totally apropos developmental stage for him, but it's still, when that I crave connection with people and I'd always rather be with somebody than be alone. But I guess when you're 12, your parents are a worse option than hitting a balloon up in the sky for an hour. So I'll give them that.
That's very true. And I remember being in that stage. I it might have been a little bit later for me, actually, when I was probably like 14. I remember one time in particular, like literally sitting in my room doing nothing, and my dad walking by and like stopping and looking at me, going like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Nothing." He's like, "No, I mean like, what are you doing?" I was like, "Nothing."
I know. I always think
And he's like, "You're
up to
doing
something.
nothing? You're doing absolutely nothing?" Yeah.
We should take a lesson from our children. If they can be completely present in that moment and not need to do anything to occupy their brain, we should probably learn something from that. Or just get a balloon.
Yeah. Well, especially in this day and age where, everyone's overstimulated and kids are having a hard time because of their addiction to their phones,
Well, which I'm sure is going to come up in our conversation with Hillary, talking about, the people who rely on AI to tell them what to do. I mean, I've used AI a little bit more in the last couple of weeks because
Oh, really?
first of all, I am 100% against generative AI in terms of imagery and things like that because of things we've talked about, the security ramifications of we think we see something that's real in the movie Mountainhead, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, but aside from that, as an actor, we've talked about the moral and the professional ramifications of someone just creating an actor from scratch. Like there's the story about the actor that is AI generated, and agencies were scrambling to sign it.
Right.
But also the ecological ramifications. The amount of data mining and energy that it takes to answer the prompt, "Hey, ChatGPT, what should I do today?" is not worth the answer of "Go take a walk." You could figure that out on your own. So I'm really against that.
Yeah, but AI is going to figure out the answer to climate change and ecological issues, right? It's just going to be if we just trust it and give it all of our data, eventually it'll go online and solve all of our problems for us.
October
That's the plan,
28,
right?
2025, the day it became aware. Yeah, but so this job that I've started recently with my friend Larry, who I'm working as an assistant for him, and I'm helping him with some TV shows. And one of the things he asked me to do was like a research project. He's like, "Find me a bunch of articles and stories on this certain subject." And that's perfect for AI, honestly. Like all you do is put in this prompt of like, "Find me 50 news stories about children who have," this isn't what the story is, I don't want to give away trade secrets, 50 stories about children who are trapped in wells, and it will compile it and give you a summary. And all I'd have to do is copy and paste that and send it to my boss. And I've done a great job. So I can understand the appeal of like, boy, that saves me time. It's probably written better than someone who isn't a good writer. So I used a little bit of it to like find some, but I only used it as a basis. And then I took some stuff and wrote it in my own voice and, picked and chose the best ones. So I can see a little bit of value where I didn't before, but anything beyond that still is terrifying. And I go, do it on your own, like put your own voice into things. But, I guess I understand a little bit more of the appeal of something like that. I still don't think it's worth the cost.
Well, the frustrating thing, like most things in this world, we talk about politics, we talk about climate change, all the big issues that we are struggling through with AI and the way that these things are going. It seems like no matter how much we talk about it, we're not going to be able to stop it from continuing to evolve the way that it is and the pace that it is. We're just going to live in that world whether we like it or not. So the question then becomes, how do we navigate that? How do we try to help people navigate that? How do we have conversations politically and otherwise, culturally, sociologically, about how to manage not even like the worst case scenarios, not even the things that are the science fiction things, but just the daily things that you're talking about. Like, what is this going to mean for humanity in terms of human connection, in terms of the things that we know are important to mental health, to how we connect with each other, and just how we decipher truth. And so these are big conversations, and hence the reason why, talking to someone like Hillary is important, because we want to come at it from all angles. And you and I just sitting down and talking about this stuff, we can only go so far. We need other people in the room.
Just go in circles.
Yeah. So anyway, what do you say we dive into the conversation with Hillary?
I mean, we could talk to her for 6-7 minutes. God. I'm rolling my eyes.
Cringe, Doug, cringe.
Exactly. Let's do it.
Skibidi toilet.
Save us, Hillary.
That means.
Well, this is taking an angry turn.
Sorry. You found me on a grumpy day.
No, we're both hopped up on cold medicine. I'm sure it has an
exactly. Coldies and Tylenol, Mr. Trump. Tylenol.
I'm actually drinking tea for the first time in years because I hate tea, but I need it. Anyway, let's get to our interview.
Let's get into it, man.
All right. Go off the rails even more.
Without any further ado, here's our conversation with pathfinding coach Hillary Spiritos, right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast. Hey, if you like what you're hearing on this episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast, take a moment and subscribe to the show, press that like button, and leave a comment in the comments section. If you want to reach us directly, you can also email us at hardertobreathepodcast@gmail.com. Now back to the show. So Hillary, welcome back to the show. It's really great to see you again after just a few months?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I had such a great time talking to you guys, honestly, and I thought we had a really interesting conversation, so I was looking forward to chatting again.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate that. I was just saying in the intro, we were just shooting right before this, I was really impressed that you took it upon yourself, like right after we had that good conversation, to just reach out to me and say, hey, let's do it again. Like that you're literally the first person, well, maybe not the first person to say that, but the first person to actually follow up with intention to make it happen. And so I was impressed by that. I'm curious, because that takes, initiative and confidence and a lot of compliments I could give you. What was going on for you? Was it just that you had a good time? What was going on in terms of your motivation for that and the follow through in doing that? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. So as I said, I had a great time, loved the conversation. I wanted to continue. I also felt that there was, when there's momentum, when you have a conversation, you want to keep going. So I just didn't want to kind of drop that ball or lose that momentum. I also think that I want to practice what I preach. And so I want to make sure that if there's something that I want, I don't let fear get in the way of that, and don't let concerns about what will you think, is that silly of me, is that too forward, any of that stuff. I don't want that to be something that stands in my way, and I don't want to bow down to those feelings. So I try to push back them as much as I can. And that's served me so far. So hopefully, I haven't, and the worst you could say, right, is no, we don't have time. And then, okay, probably ask you again later.
Well, you're talking to two guys who live in the world of, we should get drinks sometime. And then it never happens, in LA. Sure. So seeing someone who actually follows through and makes it happen, it's impressive, and a reminder that sometimes we do just have to make the follow up and push to get what we want, So I applaud it as well.
Thank you very much.
I'm somebody who has struggled with just feeling like putting myself out there too much, like self promotion, self advocacy, but self promotion, like saying, this is what I want and I'm going to go after it. For me, I don't know, for some reason, maybe it's because I came of age in the 90s and you're supposed to just not give a shit about anything. And it feels like, to me, whenever I want to do that, whenever the impulse, I have this pulling back, this thing that tells me, oh, don't do that. Like, that makes you sound like you're, I don't know, desperate or something like that, which is not the case. I mean, my mom always said to me, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And when you, in this world, if you don't ask for the things that you want, you're definitely not going to get it. But if you do, you might. And there's nothing wrong with asking for things, especially if it's something that's motivated by pure intentions. It's not like motivated by something negative.
Sure. I'm not a huge fan of self-promotion either. It doesn't feel natural to me, but I, again, trying to push past this. If there's something that I want to create and build, such as you, like, same as you guys, like, I don't want to be like, look, my biggest fear has always been in my life is like, I don't want to look back and regret that I didn't do something. So I'm trying to take as many steps and chances as I possibly can. And also the reason why I looked at you that way was because it's like our moms are the same. I mean, my mom literally says that to me on a daily basis. So like that, I have that phrase in my mind at all times. And I tell that to students and I tell that to clients. So I was like, that's great. Wonderful.
We have the same approach in our family, but it's not for self-promotion or anything. It's just to save money. So if like you can call up the cable company and being like, my bill was a little high this month. Is there anything you can do? And they'll be like, well, we'll take $5 off. And you're like, yes, that's a win. So we, honestly, a lot of times with corporations and things like I'll have a replacement part sent for something. And I was like, well, this is your fault. And they're like, all right, we'll waive the shipping. And be like, is that all you can do? And they're like, all right, fine, just take it for free. We don't care. Like sometimes just asking.
They're expecting you to stop, right? They're expecting you on the hold. They're expecting you to like hang up the phone as long as like if you're waiting too long. And so if you keep going, you'll probably get close to what you want or something similar. So good on you.
Gotta ask.
Yeah, gotta ask.
So how have things evolved since we last spoke in the work that you do? What are you seeing in your clients, and what's coming up for you that you want to continue to talk about that is relevant in terms of the clientele that you speak to?
Yeah, I think since we spoke, a lot has happened in the world.
Oh yeah, what?
What are you talking about?
And it would be wild if it didn't show up in people's daily life and what they were concerned about. It would be fascinating if somebody was just like, I mean, actually, to be honest, if somebody was so decided to not pay attention and to not engage, that is a choice in itself. And so that's a whole conversation. So whether it affects me personally, it affects someone I know, or it affects just general feeling of fear or sadness or grief or distraught or like deciding to opt out or whatever it is, it affects all of us in different ways. And so clients and young people are definitely feeling that. And I also think that what I'm hearing a lot of is just young people are just seriously, it's a challenging time for young people. They're struggling, honestly. And I really want to be a voice, and I'm sure it's same as you, a voice of guidance or motivation or help or just someone that they can talk to, because I think that this world is a very challenging time, and there are so many people who are just disregarding young people and not paying attention, and it's kind of, they're just getting lost in the shuffle. Though that's not to say there are incredible young people who are just like pushing forward. Like, I don't mean to say that they're across the board like so struggling that they can't even function, but like they're it's just a difficult time. And since we last spoke, I've just been on a real journey or development of my just like thoughts on social media, to be honest. And I've been trying to be as benefit of the doubt as possible, and I've been trying to be as open-minded. And I do think that it's in some ways a force for good, but the more I think about it and the more I talk to clients and the more I engage with young people and watch movies and read books about it, and the more I engage with these conversations that continuously to keep coming up, the more I'm just like, this is not how we're supposed to engage with each other in the world. That doesn't mean that it needs to be abolished. Like, I'm not calling for that, but I just think that it's something that needs to be, like, I have evolving views on it. And I don't think it has to go away completely. I do think that there are some really important beneficial uses of it. I do think that it can be integrated into our lives potentially in a way. I mean, look, it's also not going away anytime soon, but I really have evolving views on it, and I am getting a little bit more forceful about my views or radicalized about my views, or like, does that make, I don't know if those are the right words, but I'm just getting a little bit more, I struggle with it in the use of it a lot more than I think I used to allow myself, because I've been trying to be like,
You
you
use
can
the
use it.
term benefit of the doubt, like we all want to do that, I think, to a certain extent. Like, well, I'd like to think that this is at least not evil, like you can, there
Right.
are good benefits. And so I think to a certain extent, we have to take all those things with a grain of salt. We have to give it the benefit of that until it's proven otherwise. And we've seen that a bit more in the last 6 months, year, of like, maybe there is some evil, and so we have to adjust our expectations and our reactions accordingly. So I don't think it's not appropriate for you to be a bit more hardened in your stance of like, all right, well, maybe I'm going to push back against this a little bit more, or maybe I'm going to take a harder stance against this. When we've been shown, when someone shows you who they are, or when a social media platform shows you who they are, you have to believe them.
Exactly.
I feel the conversations we've had about this on the show, and we've had a few now, I've always felt like I'm really the cynical one talking about this stuff. I've been in the it's evil camp for a while.
Yeah.
Evil. The fruits of the devil. And my reason for that, it's just looking at it. We've seen, I mean, the data is in terms of the effect that it's having on mental health. And this goes back to Facebook. I mean, before even Instagram and TikTok and whatever else is happening now. The effect that it's had, particularly on young people, but on all of us in terms of our mental health, our anxiety, our depression, just disconnect. That's the word that always comes to mind for me, the extent to which we're losing connection with our humanity and with other human beings in ways that it feels like we're being more connected. That's the idea of it. But in reality, we're actually less connected. But in a bigger sense, for me, to just looking at it more socioculturally, I think that if you look at, for instance, the history of societies where we've had totalitarianism, authoritarianism, dictators, and governments that control everything that you do. If you look at the history of the rise of cultism, particularly in the 60s and 70s, when essentially you had highly narcissistic people that even in their own mind might have thought they were doing something good, they were helping people, or they deluded themselves into thinking that. They essentially ended up isolating people and brainwashing them into their way of thinking to have power and control over them. And so by that definition, I look at social media and especially AI today as essentially if a cult leader or a dictator were to create a device to do exactly what a cult or a totalitarian state does, like the perfect maniacal evil device to do it to the highest degree possible, it would be the algorithm. It would be what we have today. Now, that's not me saying that necessarily that Silicon Valley are all evil overlords, dictators, and cult leaders. I do think, there's a lot of ego-driven behavior, and there's a lot of, obviously, greed that's driving it more than anything. However, the effect is the same, because you put that out in the world, and everyone has access to it. So anyone with bad intentions can use it to their advantage. And more than anything, even without bad intentions, the algorithm is trapping us in our silos. It's brainwashing us and keeping us isolated without other information getting in. And so it doesn't even take a human being to be evil anymore. It just takes this algorithm to keep us in this state of disconnection in the way that you are when you're in a cult or a totalitarian state or in a narcissistic, abusive relationship. So that's a big, broad way of looking at it. But you came back on the show to talk about this stuff. How do we navigate this?
What do we do, Hillary?
Let's talk about it just on an individual level to bring it down so we don't talk in such broad terms. When you're talking to a young person that's navigating this and doesn't even understand it in those sociocultural ways, but understands the ways that they feel and how they're just trying to get by and feel human. How do you even begin to help someone work through that?
Great question, and I'm agreeing with you on a lot of what you've said. So it depends on what their perspective that they come in with. So if I speak to somebody who is aware of the fact that they do not like how they feel when they use social media, that is a different conversation than if I speak to somebody who loves social media or is severely addicted to it or doesn't want to engage with the possibility of disconnecting. I do think that more and more young people that I come across are waking up to the fact that they do not feel good when they relate to social media, but that doesn't mean that they're all feeling comfortable second guessing it or disconnecting or being like removing themselves from it. There are two things that I've been thinking about when it comes to these, like that type of question. I think there's something to be said about how to talk about this with young people, as in children and young adolescents. And then there's a different way of discussing this with people who are perhaps in their 20s, who are a little bit down the rabbit hole, perhaps, and who might not be able to totally rewired at this point in time. Whereas like younger people could potentially, their parenting could play a part in not getting devices until you're like older, or having parents like engage you in the real world as much as possible, or like, and we can talk about that, like, and how parenting affects that. But I think when you're in your 20s and you're in it, I think it is very important. The main thing I can say is to have adults around you, whether it's me, whether it is your parents, whether it's like teachers or coaches, like sports coaches or somebody who can talk to you about what it means to question and critically think and like engage with that barrier, because you might not do it without outside influences. So I think it's just really important to have people around you that will, I think it is, what I'm saying is I'm imploring everybody else to engage with their young people in their lives and to talk to them about their use of social media. I also think that it's very important to recognize that, like, for young people, it is you don't want to be isolated. You don't want to be alone. You don't want to feel like the truth is, you don't know anything, but you are trying to figure out who you are, but you don't want to feel that way. And so you're not open to the idea that, because the more open you are to the idea that you don't know anything, the more insecure and unstable you are and unsure, and that's uncomfortable to feel. And so then you turn to wanting answers and community, and it becomes this feeling of, I want to be part of the group. I don't want to fight back. I want to like get into these, I want to be part of this echo chamber. I want to say the same things everybody else is. And so it becomes this big kind of rolling ball. And I think it's just really important for people to constantly talk to young people about like their use of social media and to be conscious of it. So recognize that it's not a neutral platform. Recognize that it's optimized for your engagement. Recognize that it's rewiring your brain chemistry. Recognize that it's literally people like behind that screen who are harnessing your data and like collecting it and serving you what they think like want you to see. And it's also not only those people, but it's like advertisers who are maybe not doing it through nefarious needs. They want to be seen. They want like their thing to be bought, but then that's like being fed to you in that way. And it's just really important to recognize what it's doing and the effect it's having and the reality of what it is, and really be aware of why you're using it. So do you want creative inspiration? Are you looking for connection? And if you're looking for connection, maybe that means that you need to go outside of your house. I think you're correct in saying that we are removing face-to-face communication, which is optimal for growth and development and just making our lives happier, and in isolating ourselves more and more and putting ourselves more and more into like solitude. And the smaller and smaller you get, the more time you spend alone, the more time you engage with social media, the
cycle perpetuates.
Yeah, the cycle perpetuates. And I think it's really important to learn, like, to be pushed to do something that's uncomfortable, because what happens is that you get so comfortable in your bubble and then you don't end up engaging with anything that's uncomfortable anywhere. And then that affects literally like elections, that affects like people, that affects big things, because you just don't want to engage in something new and different.
It's a really important distinction that you point out. It's not just about not having social media, or it's not about, cutting it off. It's about understanding. It's about having that conversation, whether it's with your kids or with your peers, and figuring out understanding what the motivation behind these people and these platforms are. So you can still peruse them, you can still engage with them as long as you understand what you're in for. I think that's the important part, is like, you, as long as you understand that you are only getting half the story. If you're looking at political posts, the echo chamber that you talk about, you're not getting the whole story. So if you really want to have that be informed, then you need to seek out the other side. You need to seek out the honest kind of both sides of the discussion. And that applies to every part of social media. Seek out the people who are beauty influencers who also show when their makeup is off and go, that's not what I really look like. It's okay if you like seeing makeup tutorials and looking how beautiful you can be, but also look at what it looks like without makeup. And this is the reality. This trip that these travel influencers, they're still, they may go to Thailand and have these beautiful pictures, but they also have a 9 to 5 where they got to go back. And you know what I mean? So I think it's not just about turning it off or shunning it. It's about having a full understanding and grasp of what that contract is that you've signed up for. And I think as long as you have a bit more of that understanding, then you can start to, I've said for a long time, I only look at social media for like sports stories and comedians and like things that don't enrage me, and things that I can also verify. I can go and look at somebody else and say, okay, that's the story that I want to make sure that that's what I'm consuming. I don't want to be fed things that may mislead me or may not be the actual, factual
and
truth.
Let's not forget that they've removed fact checking and they've removed validation of things. So, the fact is, like, you can so easily, we live in such a choose your own reality situation that, that's another thing you want to engage with people is like, how do you do a background check? Like, how do you investigate the source of what you're looking at to make sure that it's valid, to make sure that it's reputable, to make sure that you're getting like the whole story, as you're saying,
that it's real, that it's not a completely AI generated video or
yeah.
It's hard. It's so hard to tell. It's hard even, I consider myself a deeply critical thinker, somebody who was trained to think critically. I went to school in the age of a liberal arts education where the idea was to formulate your own opinions about things and express them in articulate ways, and that's being minimized as well. It's like, if you don't have an engineering degree, then why bother going to school? We're supposed to focus on just creating the next tech device or the next thing that's going to make $1 billion, as opposed to what's going to maintain our humanity. But even me, somebody who my focus is on, like, well, what is it all for? What is all the $1 billion industry for if we are all miserable and losing our humanity? Even I am confused sometimes, because depending on what the algorithm is giving me, if I'm having a particularly dark day and I'm thinking about the negative things in the world, then all of a sudden I start getting a bunch of stuff about the end of the world and about why it's time to leave the country, or why and if I'm having a particularly escapist day and I'm just focusing on, cats and fun, pretty things, I get a lot of that stuff. And then I'm like not even focusing on, I'm burying my head in the sand and I'm not focusing on actual real issues. So I get confused sometimes. And then in the midst of that, you have things that trickle in that you're like, wait, how did that get here? And I don't even know, I can't even tell from looking at this. Is this a right-wing person that's trying to get their point across within this? Is this a left-wing person that's is this somebody who's apolitical and I'm just overthinking this? Am I being too cynical? Am I not being cynical enough? You know what I mean? Like, so it's a mind fuck even for somebody who is pretty awake and educated about these things. How does a 12-year-old do that? Yeah. And I'm glad that we focused on the parenting and how important that is, because we did, parenting has always been difficult. It's always been difficult to walk your children into this world and make them aware of the things that might be dangerous and might be things they need to look out for, but also not scare the hell out of them, and keep them, open to the world and open to what is good about the world, but also appropriately, protective of themselves. The world we're in now is just that much more difficult to navigate and to walk a child into for all of these reasons. Duck, I'm curious how you're navigating all this with Beckett, because he's right, as we were saying in the intro, he's right at that age where he is so susceptible, and we don't want to throw him into the fire here, but this is for you.
Yeah.
You know, he's right at that age where he's so susceptible to like 6, 7, all that stuff. And it's like, as a parent, you ultimately are the person who is the arbiter of how you're going to navigate these things with him. But at the end of the day, he's also his own person trying to discover the world. So what is your strategy at this moment?
It's exactly what Hillary was saying in that, and it's a little bit of what I was saying is that it is not, no, you cannot see. It's a little bit of this. It is not, you cannot see this. It's not, I'm not going to make it a the forbidden fruit that he's now anxious to find out what the big secret is. On the contrary, it's giving him the information and the background and the context to say, you understand that what you see in this YouTube short, what Mr. Beast does isn't real. And you can enjoy it for its face value. You can, search for deeper meaning in the political motivations and things like that. I mean, they're such a unique generation. My son is 12, Hillary, and he literally was home, out of school from COVID when January 6th happened. And I think I remember saying it then, like, I didn't know, I was 20 when the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky scandal happened, and I didn't have any idea what it was. I was so apolitical that I was like, I don't know, this doesn't matter to me. My 5-year-old was like, well, they shouldn't be storming the Capitol. Like, he had political opinions and has grown up in a world where that context is important. And my wife and I made a point to never say, this is right and this is wrong, and if you believe this, you're wrong. It's just do your own research, to quote a horrible but putting it in the proper context, providing him the knowledge that what he may see isn't going to necessarily be the truth. It may be scary, it may be confusing, and to ask and to talk to us about that stuff. I mean, I don't want to jump ahead in our conversation too far, but I see a lot of parallels with pornography and things like that kids at that age are starting to discover, and not wanting to be like, don't look at that, because he's 12, 13, that's going to start to happen. What I want him to understand is that's not real life, just like social media is not real life. So if you see something that you think is like, you want to be part of the in-group and know what people are talking about, just know that that's not real, and know that that's not how things actually happen. So you can, I'm not saying he can go look for it, but if you see it, you're going to understand that's just a heightened reality, just like social media, just like, those things. So again, it's just that conversation, preparing him for when he does come across that stuff, to have a little bit of arm's length of everything, of the grain of salt. I understand that what I'm seeing may or may not be true, and not to just blindly say, well, that's what I saw on the internet, so it's a fact, And that's all I can really do, because I want him to have that autonomy. I want him to have that freedom to make those discoveries. And I'd love for him to be like, I saw this video the other day and I did a little research and I found out it's bullshit. I'd be like, yeah, way to go, son. That would be a great day. So that's what I do.
Yeah. I mean, what it sounds like you're teaching is open communication, which is huge, as well as critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
Which is like, and in the independence of thought, which are huge things to be able to like teach a young person. Like, you have to figure it out for yourself, what you think, and come talk to me if you want to discuss it. I'm open and available for that. And also, like, question it. Question what you're seeing, question what you're being taught, question your professors, question me, question everyone.
Yeah.
And form your own opinion. And I think parents, it's tricky. It's very tricky and it's very challenging. And obviously, like, I would never tell anyone what they should or shouldn't do, and I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong, but I think, setting boundaries on your devices, like when you're at home or at school, if you can, like, also just like spending interactive, like in real life time with your kids. So like exactly having conversation at the dinner table. What are you talking about? Like, are you just putting screens in front of your kids? Are you sitting at home and watching TV? Or are you having conversations? Yeah. Like, even when my nephews were young, my sister wasn't necessarily shoving like screens at them to make them be quiet. I think there's this idea of like, I think kids should be bored again. I think kids should be able to like have to use their imagination and have to figure out what they want to do. And like, I think they should be able to like play and engage with nature and communicate with their friends and try to like, I spend hours in my room by myself when I was younger trying to just like imagine what I wanted.
We talked about this in the intro. Yeah.
My mom used to say, and she still does, she's like, grounding you was not possible because you would like great, I'll spend time in my room and hang out with myself and like but I do think that there is this instant gratification, which I do think is problematic on many levels, including what we've been talking about, but also like I think there might be it's including AI. Like I'm curious if there's going to be a time when we just like don't know how to engage with anything less than immediate response, and I just don't. I'm a little bit nervous about what that world looks like, because that's not how humans operate. So like, are you just going to have no patience to talk to another human being unless that person can like literally like talk to you in less than a second? Like, and then how are you going to like that would just, your spark would be so short. That's part of a different conversation, but that's something I'm thinking about.
That's my biggest fear, really, of all this, because beyond the being lied to and the gaslighting and the brainwashing that goes on with the algorithm and the people that utilize it to benefit their whatever agenda they have, what we're losing amidst all of this is authentic connection, human connection. And that's the bigger arcing thing. And at the end run of this conversation, I want to talk about like ways in which we can foster authentic human connection in the world that we're in now and the world that we're moving into as these things continue to ramp up. But before we get to that, if you can't even talk to a human being, like how are you going to find friends? How are you going to find a partner? How are you going to find real, genuine, romantic connection? I don't know if you saw this week, Sam Altman of OpenAI announced that ChatGPT is not going to exclude erotica. In fact, they're going to lean into that as part of the app moving forward. We just had this new friend of ours, Curtis Morley, on an episode recently, and we had our first conversation about sexual addiction, specifically porn addiction. And he came at it from a different perspective than us, and it was interesting for us to engage in terms of our different perspectives. But moving forward from that, my big fear connected with what we're talking about is not just like, oh, I have a problem with porn, but now you're talking about artificial intelligence, which is people are going to be engaging with from an earlier and earlier age, learning that it used to be bad enough that it's like, as you were saying, Doc, you think this is what sex is, when really this is people that are performing for you, and you're not having to engage in any real human way or learn how to give or receive. You're just learning how to take, the eroticism of that. Now you're just going to be engaging with something that's specifically designed to give you pleasure and give you what you want without having to form an actual connection. So how does that factor into, for you, Hillary, just in a broader sense in terms of human connection, whether it's sexuality, our relationships to our own sexuality, but also more importantly, like how we're connecting with people, partners, friends, or otherwise, something that's not just not going away, but it's actually going to get worse in these regards.
Yeah, I struggle with this because I fully agree. So I think it's already starting to happen, right? Like there is a real, in the dating world of today, for example, of men and women not being able to find adequate partners, or in their views, adequate partners. And there is something to be said about men, particularly, looking to porn to teach them how to engage in sex, how to engage in partnership, but mostly sex, or how to just treat a woman. I mean, that's also it going into Andrew Tate and all that, like how to just generally treat another human being. And I think, and my concern is that does just get more and more like part of our society. I think young people today, though I think it's true across the board, are lonely. And I think we are in a world that is really seriously lacking in connection. And kind of what I talked about earlier, which is the more you step away from what's uncomfortable, the more you don't engage in the real world, the more your world becomes smaller. And part of that like has to do with the pandemic and like just retreating into yourself and retreating into your bubble and like getting into that safety space. That is going to create a smaller, more radicalized, more divided world. And I think what's interesting, I hope I'm not going too left field of this, but I find like this idea of a male loneliness epidemic really interesting, because I think by labeling it that, and I feel like it's all over social media and it's all a lot of people are talking about, is this male loneliness epidemic. And I think what it's doing is it's serving to isolate men further and discounting the idea that we're all lonely. And it's what it's doing is it's kind of just like splitting society even further and just making it impossible for people to just recognize that we're all in this together. And I think there's so much more, like, I think the male loneliness epidemic is like, or that idea is like a really interesting topic. But I think what it's doing is it's just like making men feel like this is this is a burden they have to bear and something they have to deal with. And like, this is the only way they can connect with women is by like making them like only engaging with women how they want to, and they're afraid of women. And like, it's just, it gets to be tricky. But I think what we're doing is we're isolating people even further, and I think that's problematic.
I think the dangers is that, like we talked about with the social media conversation, is that we have allowed a meme, for example, to be the voice of what all women are looking for, the 6'5" finance bro. Like, right. That's one woman who said that, and it became a movement of like, well, this is all women want. So if I'm not 6'5" and make $1 million a year, I'm useless. Well, that's this subset of people who are and there are men who go, well, she's got to be 36, 24, 36, and she's, right. I mean, it's not a realistic arbiter of what people are looking for, but because it gets repeated in the echo chamber, and lonely men scrolling apps in the algorithm see, well, that's all women want. What chance do I have? And we get the whole 80% of men are chasing 20% of the women. And, we get all those dumb stats and things that aren't real. They're not based in anything except...
That stat is
it's
all
just,
over the place.
It's just generated to make people feel less than and to strive to be that 20%, and whatever it takes to do that, if it means, the negging women and being, that energy, then that's what they'll have to do. I mean, it's not a realistic representation of that world. I mean, I haven't been in the dating world in 20 years, but it isn't that. It's people just looking for a connection. It's just, it's not a realistic representation.
Well, I have been on the dating apps for the first time in my life. I've been single for a year. I was in a relationship since before all that stuff existed, before that. And so I've gotten my first education on this stuff. And it is interesting because you go on there and it is a different world. Talk about an algorithm that affects how we perceive things. Just like you, Doug, I would have said the same thing a year ago in terms of what reality is. And I'm like, I'm not seeing that. Why are people talking about that? That's just something they're seeing on their phones. Mm-hmm. When you go into the dating apps and you see, I mean, I can see it even in myself. Of course, I'm attracted to the most attractive women physically first. Like, that's what you see. And then you start to realize that like half of those people aren't even real people. They're just like a bot or somebody who's just trying to get you to go to their Instagram page and follow them or something like that. But even the ones that are hyper attractive, they probably have a filter on their photos, and then you look at their bio and the things that they say, and half of them are talking about how don't bother unless you're, intentional about marrying and having kids and you want to spend a lot of money on me, essentially. There's like a lot of that. And so I'm like, wait, is this women? Because in my experience, this wasn't women. I've met a lot of women in my life. This isn't what women are in real life. But that's what I'm perceiving, is that the ones that I'm most attracted to are not going to be attracted to me if I'm not uber rich, willing to spend a lot of money on them and commit today to funding their lifestyle. And I'm like, okay, well, that makes me really cynical about women and about dating. I'm like, I've dated women. I'm in my 40s. Like, I've dated women my whole life. I've run into maybe one or two people like that growing up in LA, which is like the most superficial place that in people's minds, at least. That's another reality versus, how people perceive things. I grew up in LA. I don't see a lot of the things that people criticize LA for, but so that's a perfect example of how the algorithm and how you perceive things online is not indicative necessarily of reality, but it is true on those apps that unless you're like, you have a six pack and you have, millions of dollars and whatever, like a lot of people will swipe right past you and not even consider the fact that might be somebody that if I met in real life, I might really like them. Mm-hmm. That's somebody that actually is sweet and honest and cute and whatever, all the things that in person I would find really attractive. But because they're not uber elite attractive on the screen and in the stats that they're listing, I'm going to pass right over them. And it works both ways. I think because of pornography and other things that we perceive, all the filters and everything, men see women and then in their minds, if you're not like a 10 out of 10, I'll find somebody else that is. Yeah. And in real life, you wouldn't do that. If you were meeting people at school or at work or anywhere, you'd be like, oh, that person's really cute. Oh, I got to talking to them and we had a connection. That was great. Maybe I should ask them out. Like, people don't get the chance to do that because they've already swiped right past them. Yeah. And there's the other aspect of where you're like, well, I could commit to this person who seems like maybe we have a lot in common. I could ask them out and go out on a date with them, but I'm going to hold out for something better because look, there's all these other options. You think you have an endless amount of options and then you end up not pursuing anyone. And so I think it's a situation where when you're living in this avatar, when you're living in this world, and that's just the dating apps, but this is the truth for how we perceive the world as avatars navigating social media abroad, that you end up passing up a lot of life and a lot of living and a lot of human connection because you're perceiving it in the ways that those things are presenting it to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a bit about online dating. As someone who's been in and out of it, I think, first of all, I think it's important for everyone to recognize that it's a paid subscription. Like, you can use it for free, but it is something that can ultimately cost money. So I think thinking it's this just like free thing that people aren't hiding behind a paywall or whatever it is inaccurate. I like this idea that Hinge is whatever, like, made to be deleted is bullshit, right? Like, they want you to keep being using it. But I do think hearing it from young people and also being like talking to my peers, like, you'll be looking at a photo or reading something and it'll like, you'll question it or you'll judge it. Whereas like it just being so visual about it, like, makes you able to judge something that you would never judge in real life or that you would never even second think in real life. It is, I think what you're saying is exactly accurate. You are going to miss out on real life if you continue to stay in your home. I had a client previously who did just that. They kind of, every time they thought they might want to try something, they would go once and then decide it wasn't for them. They would kind of talk themselves out of it. Or they would decide, I'd rather actually watch TV, or I'd rather go on social media and not engage at all. And actually what ended up happening is they became so isolated and so in their own mind and so unhappy that they ultimately decided that they needed to really make a change. Like, it really closes your world down to such an extent that it will make you unhappy. It will. Yeah. And so I think it is exactly engaging with other people, getting out in nature, cultural events, doing it alone. Go to a movie alone. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you're just around people engaging in something that is bigger than you is critical to human development, personal development, like happiness, all of that stuff. And just like learning about who you are, what you want, your place in the world. Like, part of the reason why he wasn't able to figure out what he wanted to do, he was like going to graduate college, is because he didn't allow himself to have any thought about like what possibilities are out there. He had no idea about what it would mean to engage with anything. Everything was so frightening. And that is like, you will feel lost and you will not be able to engage with what you want until you experience the world.
Well, the good news is that it's an immediately correctable change, for lack of a better explanation. I'll tell a quick story that illustrates this. My family was at a friend's house. They're having a garage sale because they're moving, and so
Love.
they brought all of their stuff, all their toys from when their kids were little, and we brought a bunch of our stuff and our toys from when my son was little. Well, these two 12-year-olds who would rather be on Roblox or whatever, they were forced to be outside all day with us selling things. And let me tell you, all those Nerf toys, all those pogo sticks, all the things that hadn't been played with in 5 years got more use that day. And then friends came over and they all played. They played in the street. There wasn't a phone or a watch to be, and I know I sound like an old man, but
Nope.
I think of people who smoked for their whole life, and it's like there's a stat like the second you quit smoking, your lung health recovers like 300%. Like immediately it starts to regenerate and you get healthier. The minute whether they're 12-year-old kids or whether it's somebody who's stuck in an algorithm, decides I'm going to go to a bookstore and maybe meet somebody, or I'm going to go to a concert, or I'm going to, it immediately it's like the going from black and white to color in The Wizard of Oz. You can
And it's
immediately,
endorphin.
you can immediately realize, what have I, this is what I've been avoiding. This is what I've been hiding behind. My God, what was I thinking? So if there's someone out there who's listening to this and is scared to take that next step, or to put down the phone, or to close the app and go out and have a real experience, let me tell you, there's nothing like real life compared to, on a 4-inch screen. So don't be afraid. Get out there and do it.
Yeah, and it is uncomfortable and it is scary. I don't mean to say that it's not that. Then you build up a tolerance, right? Oh, I've done something scary before. I kind of know what that's like. I've gone out and played with that pogo stick, whatever it might be. And
Hey.
do you remember like those skip it things? Anyway.
Oh yeah, that was there. I was at the garage sale.
I loved those. But like I've done that before, and then you build up a tolerance and you build up a tolerance, and then you can think to yourself, oh, okay, now I'm going to ask that person out. Or because then also what's important to note is the worst thing that can happen, right, is that they say no.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, they say no, but like you put yourself out there. Like that's amazing. And then also you had this life experience, and then also maybe that person wasn't right for you. So like that's not even the worst. Like the worst thing isn't the worst thing, right? Like it's adjusting those expectations. So it's scary, it's uncomfortable, but it's worth it for sure.
The worst thing is what's happening to you without your knowledge. You're the lobster in the pot who's slowly getting boiled. So getting out isn't the worst thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, in the most positive sense, we've just sort of segued into what I had said I wanted to earlier, which is like, well, in the most positive sense, how do we foster authentic connection in the midst of all of this without dwelling on all the ways that we're stuck with this world as it is, as it's evolving. Like, what are we doing about it? How are we finding ways to maintain our humanity? We recently had another guest on named Steve Braun, friend of Duck's, who at the end of our conversation, I was asking him a lot of really big questions, societal questions, and I threw a doozy at him at the end. It was like, how do we bridge this gap between the extremes on the left and the right? Our political conversation has gotten Fix it, Steve. Yeah. And he said something that I honestly didn't expect, but it was really spot on. It was like, I don't think words are going to solve it. We were yelling at each other. There's no words you can choose that's going to change the other person's mind. We're going to have to remember that we're both human beings somehow. And the way you do that is with somatic connection. It used to be that regardless of how you differed in your opinions and your beliefs, whatever, when you're sitting next to a human being and you're engaging in something physical together, you're just teammates at that point. You're just people on this planet together. And he likened it to, festivals and concerts and playing music together and dancing together and that type of thing. We sometimes minimize those things or think like, oh, those are fun things to do every now and then, to get out and whatever. But there really is, as much as there's a need for us to communicate, because we're communicative social animals, there's a need in our bodies to be present with other human beings. There's something that happens hormonally and in our nervous system, because so much of what we perceive, especially when we see it online and we're just bombarded with the news that's always negative, and it's overwhelming how much we feel like, well, everything is just out to get me, and it makes you so cynical, which creates even further disconnect and more isolation. just being around people and realizing like 99% of the people in this world you're safe around. Like there are some people that are dangerous, and we try to be, protective and figure out ways to protect ourselves from those people. But most people are your friend when it really comes down to it. If you were in danger, they would help you. You know what I mean? If you're just human beings and there's a car on fire and your baby's in it, whoever it is, different color, different race, different religious belief, different political belief, those people would come together and try to get that baby out of that car, And so how can we be together physically in a way that you feel in your body, somatically, safety with other human beings, connection with other human beings, that these are not my enemies, that this is something that I need more of in my life, which is to feel close to people and feel safe with people. So another big question, but I'll bring it down to a small level. In the most positive sense, when you're talking about people that are stuck in this feedback loop that you described earlier, where you keep going back to the same well, that addictive process of trying to solve the problem of what you're feeling with more of the thing that's causing the problem. How do you break that cycle? How do you begin to just put a wrench in that loop and step out? Is it just very simple, basic things, or is it a big dramatic shift in your lifestyle? Like how do you get somebody who's younger than us in a world that it's so hard to get stuck in, to realize and to really do that really difficult and scary thing of reaching out and finding connection?
That's a really great question, because I think what's also important to note, and I fully agree, I think what's important to note is words can be very helpful and beneficial, obviously, and connective, but they can also make someone get very defensive and can be a form of just like distance, and can make people feel like they're more isolated and more like taken aback. So I think getting in your body and surrounding yourself with other people would be beneficial. And that is, it's a spectrum, I think. So like if there's somebody who potentially doesn't like how they're feeling on social media and is already feeling like they want more connection, those people, it might be a smaller change, and they might look for a run club, or they might look for a third space, or they might look for something that is like an art class or something that they might find to do with other people, or they might not look for it on their own, but they might do so with some nudge from somebody else. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there are people that are not going to engage with people who are different than them, and that is just the way that is, and that is unfortunately the case for some people. And it might take a big momentous shift, and it has happened where like I saw an interview with somebody who was an extreme like white nationalist Christian, grew up in that world, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but she went and stayed with somebody who was in a different city that she had to do have an interview in or something, and she stayed with somebody who was different than her and realized that, oh, they're just people too. That can happen, but that's a little bit more of a unique story. People who are in the middle, I do think need to potentially be seriously nudged or pulled out of this like echo chamber and algorithm and made to do something outside of their sphere. So if it's something like, come with me to do this, like I'm having this, like we're going to this party, we're going to do this thing, we're going, like it might have to be a little bit more of a shove, or just like a real talk with, this is what is going to happen, this is what's happening in your brain and in your life if you decide to only continue in this fictional like virtual world. It's not sitting right with most people. I think most people are feeling like this is not the way they want to proceed, and I think that most people are feeling like seriously disconnected. People are recognizing that they are disconnected from other people, and Gen Z and Gen Alpha especially are realizing that this is not how to live their lives, and so they are getting more and more getting out there, and I think that's very, very like positive to see. Yeah.
That is encouraging. A helpful thing to remember because I'm as guilty as anyone of being cynical, and when you see a trend that is really devastating our humanity, and it makes you wonder, like, where are we headed? How much worse is this going to get? to remember that like history is cyclical, and trends that go up, they tend to go down. Like there's a backlash to everything, every movement.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole information age that we're living in, I don't think we can end it, or we certainly can't roll back time.
Right.
But it was created by people, maybe with best intentions, maybe thinking this is the thing that's going to bring us all together, and then not fully comprehending the negative effects that it's going to have.
Sure.
But then it really was just an industry that moved forward because of money, just wanting to make more money. And then an entire generation, or two have been really, really negatively impacted by it. But now you're starting to see the backlash to that, to the recognition that like we're in this mess in so many ways because of, I honestly believe the place that we're in, the divide that we have in our society culturally and politically, is like 90% to do with the media that we consume. It's the technology that has gotten us here. Because, like I said earlier at the start of this conversation, it's like the thing that if you were trying to brainwash people, it's the ultimate device you would create to do that. And even with best intentions, that's how we've ended up it affecting us. And of course, a lot of people don't have best intentions as well. And so I think people are waking up to that to a certain extent, but we need to continue to have these conversations for people to understand that that's what's happening. Because the worst thing that can happen is for us to all just get numb to it all and to just fall into our little, like the movie Idiocracy, just sitting on our chairs, like drinking out of a feeding tube and playing our video games while the world is falling apart around us.
Yeah. My concern is that's their hope. That's my concern. Is that's their hope, is that we just decide, like exactly your lobster in the pot is like that we just get like desensitized and desensitized. We see all of this stuff happening in the world. We see war, we see mass shootings, we see all of this stuff happening constantly. And I do feel like the rage, there's a lot of rage there's a lot of protests and stuff, but I do feel like for a while it was getting less and less. You hear about it less and less, and that was very frightening. I think there are a lot of movies and books to talk about this. The Social Dilemma is like a really interesting movie to watch about how all of these people who started at these AI companies have realized that they've really made a mess, and they've just decided that they're really gonna try to reshape the world of social media and wake up society. I think it's just really interesting to note that like it's like the fact that we're even labeled followers and is really frightening, right?
Good point.
Yeah.
I just feel like all of this stuff, like likes and followers and all of this stuff is just like gets in your head, right? And really makes you, whether you know it or not, is like when you in your lexicon you're like, I'm following this person, or like they follow me. It's like we're sheep, and it's really, you need to kind of register that that's a real thing.
It's like when you watch a documentary about a cult and they have like a lot of footage of it from early on before people realized it was a cult, and you see all the things that they lay out. Like, here are the tiers, and here's where you got to, isolate yourself from your family. And if you are, listening to people that disagree with the cult, then those people are your enemy, and you need to cut them out of your life. And all the things that you're like, how did you not see this? How did you not see, you're following this person or this system that is isolating you and brainwashing you. And like every step of the way, it's like it's just from the cult playbook. And that's what we're living in right now. And yet a lot of people, it almost seems, and you said, that's what they want. They want you to be, just numb and isolated and disconnected. And that's obviously taking it to the most cynical degree in terms of the tech world. No, but I don't know that you're wrong at this point because and I think the motivation still is money and greed. However, I think that there also is this sort of egomaniacal or even megalomaniacal mindset for a lot of these people that is much the same that drives a person to become a dictator or an emperor, in terms of just like the influence and power that you have over society and the amount of people that you have control over. And they state it in these very hyper idealistic ways, which is the way that a cult leader does it. Like, hey, the world is going to shit. Here's the solution. only I can fix it. And it's this thing that we're going to create that's going to fix it all for you. AI is going to end climate change. We just have to give it all our data, and it's going to come up with the solution. And it's like, okay, when I hear that, I think either you're the most naive person on this planet, like you really just can't see all the negative things that could come from the ways in which you're just handing everything over to something that has so many pitfalls to it. Or the much more realistic thing, which is that of course you know all the things that are going to come of this, and you don't give a shit because it's going to give you more money, more power, and just make the scope of your influence that much greater, and make people just completely subservient to your will. So I don't want to be that cynical, but it's hard not to be, because you see that and you're like, these people are not naive. They know what they're creating, but they're telling us to be naive, to just trust it. It's all going to be fine.
Yeah,
I hate to end on a cynical.
I think just two things I would like to say. Like, I watched an interview with Miranda Kerr, whose husband is Evan. I forget his last name, but he's like the creator or CEO of Snapchat. And one of the questions was, how do you deal with screens, like at home? And she was like, oh, well, my husband really doesn't like screens. And I was like, oh, well, that's telling, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Like, we're giving it to all of you, but we don't.
we wouldn't do it.
Don't use from your own supply.
The tobacco CEOs are all non-smokers. Are like, that stuff will kill you.
And I also think what's interesting is what you were talking about. Like, it is very easy to become radicalized in the world of today because it offers solutions that look simple and righteous, and like there are villains and there are heroes. And I think what's really important to recognize is there is no such thing as a real easy answer, which is why when you ask questions, I'm saying what I think, I'm saying what my experience is, but I don't have a quick and easy answer to this. There's no such thing. So anybody who says anything from AI is going to fix climate change to lose weight in a day to like solve all your problems very quickly. I mean, that's kind of a problem with, like, in the coaching industry, all these people who are having like completely turn around your life in a week. It's not going to happen. And it is challenging and it takes time. So I think, because of social media and because of technology, like we don't, and the speed of AI, like we don't allow that time. We don't give ourselves that time. We don't allow that we don't allow someone to not have the answer. And that is part of what propels us to continue like hoping and praying for these real easy answers, and then thus get in line with the people that supposedly will give it to us, which is,
well, it's a perception shift of we used to encourage people to say, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to pursue the answer. Now, in today's rapid-paced climate, that is a sign of weakness, saying, I don't know the answer to this. You know, we talked about it on our political episode. It's not weakness at all. I would so much rather a president say, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a virologist. I don't know this stuff. I defer to the people who are. And yet we are now inundated in a world where people go, I know the answer. Forget all that stuff. Forget science. Forget this and that. And that's a perception change that has completely altered what we view as strength and what we view as capability and all those things. And as long as that's the reality that we live in, you're never going to get true seeking of knowledge. You're only going to get the quick fix, which, like you say, in 2 years down the road, oh, well, we didn't realize the ecological ramifications of AI. And it shows so short-sighted.
Yeah, as a note, just like for listeners or anybody, like be wary of people who are like snake oil salesmen. Like be wary of people who are going to propose that they're going to like have this quick, easy fix. Like that is what you should question.
Yeah, and I think in the most optimistic sense that I was saying earlier,
bring it back something.
Bring it back to the positive.
Right?
Yeah. In the most positive sense, this moment in history that we're living in will pass. And I think we're living in a moment in history of reactionary thought and reactionary action. And of course, when people feel scared and vulnerable, they're going to respond to what they perceive as strength and consistency and a lot of things. That's how these manipulative types gain power, is by giving you simple solutions to complicated problems, right? And so it's up to us as the people who are sensitive thinking people that believe in truth, believe in education, believe in authenticity and human connection, and that the way through this is to maintain our humanity, not to lose it further, to continue to have these conversations and to connect in human ways as we are today, even though it's on a screen.
Yes.
We'll fly you out for the 3rd episode, Hillary.
Can't wait.
Every one of these conversations matters. I think that we're doing our part, even if I don't know how many people will watch or listen to this episode, but every single one that does, if they're even just a little bit more inclined to go out and have an authentic human connection and give someone a chance to realize, like, even though we believe different things, we're both human beings, like the way through this is together, whatever little bit we can nudge in that direction. At some point, there's going to be a tipping point. This period in history that we're living through right now, where we've been embracing the Napoleonic complex as the thing to follow, there will be a reaction to that too. There will be a moment when we recognize what real strength is, and that it's in vulnerability.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the young people who are running for office. Like, look at all the young people who are talking in their graduation speech to, like, speak truth to power. I mean, there are young people who are going to protests and organizing these. Like, I think there's people who are searching for that, and I do believe that's happening. I just think it's very important for people to really be aware of what's going on. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll end it on that. And thank you so much, Hillary, again, for coming back and speaking with us again today.
Amazing. Thank you both.
Yeah, this was a lovely conversation. And, of course, tune in every Tuesday when new episodes come out. Today, our guest was Hillary Spiritus. Joining us again. It was a wonderful conversation. We'll have another great conversation next week, next Tuesday. Join us again right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast.
Right.